Psychology has looked into people with truly extraordinary IQs and found a picture that's totally different from what we expect. In this video, I want to share some of the newest scientific findings on this topic. Some of them might be the opposite of what you think, and some might be exactly what you or someone close to you experiences every single day. Stay with me until the end, because your whole view of highly intelligent people is going to change, and maybe you'll realize you're one of them too. The first finding comes from personality research. The common idea is that a genius should have a strict schedule, a tidy desk, and never procrastinate. But research done on thousands of people across dozens of countries shows the exact opposite. People with higher IQs often don't need a high level of order to succeed, because they can get there just by relying on their analytical mental power. Researchers explain it this way. People with lower mental ability tend to develop higher levels of order and planning to compensate, so they can reach similar results. But smart people, since they can find mental shortcuts, sometimes look disorganized or even messy from the outside, even though that's not really true. They just keep their order inside their head. This is exactly why so many geniuses throughout history had desks covered in scattered papers and notes, while their minds were completely organized and active. The second finding touches on one of the more interesting personality paradoxes. You might think the smarter someone is, the more likely they are to distance themselves from others. But psychological research shows exactly the opposite. People with higher IQs tend to be more trustworthy, honest, and social. This finding is so counterintuitive that the researchers themselves wrote in their reports about how unexpected it was for a lot of people. The explanation given is that a huge part of human mental evolution was shaped through social cooperation, so a brain that's better at recognizing patterns and understanding situations is probably also better at group cooperation, because it can understand other people's needs, emotions, and motivations more easily. The third finding relates to a personality trait called openness to experience. This trait might have the strongest connection to high intelligence. People who score high on this tend to seek variety, welcome new ideas, have stronger imaginations, and are more sensitive to the emotions and moods around them. This means someone with a high IQ experiences the world with constant curiosity and an ongoing desire to discover new things. A highly open person might research quantum physics one day, pick up a new instrument the next, and then dive into a completely unfamiliar philosophy. This variety isn't just enjoyable for their mind, it's almost a basic need. Now, for the fourth finding, we get to a part of the story you might not have heard before, and it really deserves your full attention. There's an old but still relevant theory in psychology called the theory of overexcitability, first introduced by a Polish psychiatrist named Kazimierz Dabrowski. According to this theory, people with high potential for mental growth show more intense reactions to their environment in 5 different areas: psychomotor, sensory, intellectual, imaginational, and emotional. This means these people don't just think faster, they also feel sounds, lights, and other people's emotions more intensely. Dabrowski called this state overexcitability and explained that these people are sometimes described by those around them as nervous, overly sensitive, or even strange, when in reality, they're just experiencing the world with more intensity. Someone with sensory overexcitability might be deeply bothered by a bright light bulb or the faint ticking of a wall clock, sounds that other people around them wouldn't even notice. The fifth finding is one of the most important and at the same time, one of the most painful parts of this whole story. Research has shown that people with very high IQs report higher rates of mood and anxiety disorders compared to the general population, sometimes up to twice the average rate. A theory called overexcitable mind, overexcitable body explains that this comes from 2 sources. First, a mental tendency toward overthinking and constant worry, and second, the body's physical reaction to everyday stress. When the brain is always in analysis and evaluation mode, even small stressors can show up physically, like a racing heart or tense muscles. The sixth finding, which gets much less attention, is the strange relationship between high intelligence and sleep quality. You might think a powerful mind should be able to rest more easily, but the data says something different. Studies done on children with very high IQs show that a significant percentage of them experience sleep issues, like trouble falling asleep, waking up at night, and nightmares more often than their peers. The explanation for this comes back to that same idea of overexcitability. A mind that's constantly analyzing and processing during the day doesn't just shut off easily at night either. Psychologists compare this to a constant inner dialogue, an inner voice that's always evaluating, criticizing, and forming theories throughout the day. And when night comes and the environment goes quiet, that voice doesn't go quiet too. It actually gets louder. Even stranger, in one experiment, people with higher intelligence made more mistakes than others on memory and calculation tests after just one night of poor sleep. This finding shows that even the most powerful minds are vulnerable to lack of sleep, and maybe they need good sleep even more than everyone else. The seventh finding might be the most painful one, and it doesn't get talked about enough: existential depression. Psychologists who work with highly intelligent people say these individuals experience more inner tension than others. This tension can lead to a sense of alienation, regret over paths not taken, envy toward childhood, and a constant feeling of not fitting in. This experience becomes more intense when a person has deep ability and insight, but their surroundings, whether academic or professional, only reward a narrow range of skills. In that situation, the person feels like their real talents are never truly seen, and that can turn into a deep, lasting sadness. One of the less talked about parts of this experience is a kind of envy that people are often embarrassed to even admit to. Envy toward those who have simpler, more visible achievements. A lot of these people learn to suppress that envy because they think a smart person should be above these shallow concerns, when really, that feeling is completely natural and human. The eighth finding is something called the zone of mental tolerance. Basically, the bigger the mental distance between two people, the harder it becomes to build a real deep connection between them. For people with very high IQs, finding others who can engage with them on the same level can be a real challenge on its own. This is exactly the moment when a sense of social loneliness forms, even when the person is surrounded by plenty of people. This kind of loneliness is different from physical loneliness. The person might be surrounded by people on every side and still feel like nobody really understands them. The ninth finding, which might be a bit more comforting, relates to a simple but very common behavior: talking to yourself. A study published in 2017 found that this behavior is linked to better performance in problem solving, reasoning, focus, and even motivation. So when someone mutters their thoughts under their breath, it's not necessarily a sign of distress. It can actually be a sign of an active mental system that's organizing complex information. When the mind says a complicated idea out loud, it's like examining that idea from more angles, which makes it easier to spot weaknesses or logical contradictions in it. The 10th finding, which you might not have thought of as a sign of high intelligence before, is the connection between high IQ and a sharp sense of humor. Coming up with a joke is actually a far more complex task than we tend to think. The brain has to recognize patterns, predict what the listener expects, break that expectation, and then connect two seemingly unrelated ideas in a single moment. This process requires the same kind of mental flexibility used in solving complex problems. When someone quickly understands layered, complicated jokes and can come up with a clever, funny response on the spot, that's not just a personality trait. It's a reflection of how fast their mind processes information. The 11th finding, which is really worth pausing on, is a familiar experience for a lot of people with strong analytical minds. A decision that should be simple turns into a long, exhausting process. Psychologists call this analysis paralysis, when your mind automatically considers every possible scenario, every risk, and the long-term consequences of even the smallest choice. Even picking a restaurant for lunch can turn into a full research project. The 12th finding, which gets talked about a lot but maybe isn't reflected on enough, is the connection between high intelligence and a deep need for solitude. A lot of these people, even if they seem social and talkative on the outside, feel a strange kind of tiredness after spending time in crowded gatherings, one that's different from physical tiredness. Neurologists who study the brain structure of introverted people say these individuals tend to have more activity in the frontal lobe, the part of the brain responsible for analytical thinking, long-term planning, and deep information processing. This means when these people are in a busy, stimulating environment, their brain processes all of those stimuli at the same time, which drains their mental resources quickly. That's why the need for solitude for these people isn't just a simple social preference. It's a real physiological need to recharge their mental resources. When they don't get enough space for solitude and quiet, that same analytical ability that's their biggest strength gradually starts to decline because the brain never gets the chance for deep processing and integrating new information. Okay, now that we have a fuller picture, let's get to the point I promised you at the beginning. All of these findings share one common message. The real problem for intelligent people isn't that they're too smart. The problem is that their environment, whether social or professional, often isn't designed to make the best use of this kind of mind. A mind that reacts more intensely than usual in 5 different areas feels suffocated in a simple, uniform environment, not because something's wrong with the environment, but because its real needs aren't being met. When these people find the right environment and the right people to express their mental capacity, that same high sensitivity turns into a powerful engine for creativity and growth. In the end, high intelligence isn't just about solving equations or memorizing information. At its core, it's nothing more than curiosity, a mind that's always searching for patterns, questioning assumptions, and trying to understand the strange puzzle of being human. So next time you catch yourself talking to yourself or stuck on some small detail, or wide awake at midnight thinking about something tiny, instead of thinking something's wrong with you, smile, because it means the engine of that race car is running at full power.